Welcome back to the deep dive. When we think about those huge faith-based movements in history, the ones that just seem to erupt out of nowhere.
That rapid expansion, yeah.
Exactly, the deep impact. We tend to see them as, I don't know, lightning strikes. Or maybe the work of one or two really heroic people doing impossible things.
Right. The singular genius model.
But the sources we're looking at today, especially from Holding the Rope Together, they argue that the lightning strike isn't actually the story.
No, not at all. The real story is the architecture that captures that lightning. The structure that can channel its energy, not just for a moment, but for generations.
I like that. So it's less about the charismatic figure and more about, as the sources put it, the architecture of a God-sized movement.
That's it, exactly. They argue that lasting impact isn't built by isolated heroes or, some clever human strategy. It's sustained by what they call a restored missional ecosystem, one that's designed for interdependence.
A missional ecosystem, okay, that word alone, ecosystem, it completely shifts the focus from like an individual's to-do list to a structural necessity.
It does.
So if we're building this kind of enduring architecture, what are the foundational roots? What do the sources say is absolutely non-negotiable?
The material is very clear on three things. First, it has to be Trinitarian interdependence. The idea is that the movement structure has to mirror the nature of God, that mutual indwelling of the Father, Son, and Spirit. It's a blueprint, not just a nice suggestion.
Okay, so divine blueprint. What's second?
Second is sustained prayer. This is really specific about this. Prayer isn't just the warm-up act. It's the primary persistent engine that fuels the entire thing.
And the third?
Obedient participation. This is a really big shift. It's about moving the entire church from being sort of passive consumers of spiritual goods to being active, mobilized contributors to the mission.
Wow, that is a demanding standard. So for our deep dive today, our mission is to figure out why the current models so often fail, and then to map out the blueprint for building something that actually has resilience.
Let's start with the crisis. Let's unpack why things break.
All right, let's do it. The fractured system. If interdependence is the goal, then the problem has to be a broken system. So what are the specific structural issues that cause these passionate missions to just collapse?
It absolutely boils down to that broken ecosystem. And the biggest failure point, the one the sources keep coming back to, is what they call the false hierarchy.
A false hierarchy, what does that mean?
It means we've created a structure where we elevate the goer, the traditional missionary, the one crossing borders, as this elite, indispensable hero.
The person on the ground doing the visible, dramatic work. They get the spotlight, the praise.
And almost all of the resources. Precisely. And in doing that, we actively, even if it's unintentional, we marginalize the other critical, unseen roles. The sender, the intercessor, and the coach. These are the roles providing the infrastructure, the spiritual power, and the emotional resilience. But they get treated like secondary support staff.
And that's not just about, hurt feelings. It's a real structural flaw.
It's a catastrophic one. Because when all the funding and all the attention follows that one hero, the essential systems that the intercessor and the coach provide get starved. And that ultimately leads to the goer burning out and the mission failing.
That is a huge insight. The false hierarchy isn't just inefficient. It's an active resource allocation error. It basically guarantees fragility, which I guess leads right into the second crisis they talk about, zeal without structure.
Yes. I mean, that intense passion is absolutely necessary to get something started. But if you look at movements that start fast and then just collapse, they almost always lack those architectural roots.
So zeal is the fuel, but there's no engine.
It's high-octane fuel, exactly. But without a robust shared structure, that initial intensity just leads to exhaustion, to chaos, and long-term fragility. We see these brilliant, zealous projects just flame out because they couldn't distribute the load.
And the third crisis seems to be about the local church itself, this concept of the destination church.
This one is so important because it challenges the operating model for a lot of very successful churches. The sources contrast two models. The undesirable one is the church as a greenhouse.
A greenhouse, meaning it's good at growing things.
It's great at it. It gets people healthy, nurtured, strong, but it keeps them inside. The goal is to have impressive plants. But for a movement to spread, the church has to act like a distribution center.
A launch pad.
A launch pad. It has to be designed to aggressively release its healthiest people, its resources, and its vision outward.
So if you put it all together, the crisis isn't really a lack of passion or people. It's a deep misunderstanding of architecture and interdependence. It's everyone working in their own little silo.
Which brings us right to the solution. Because interdependence isn't just a good strategy, it's a theological necessity.
And the blueprint for that, the sources say, is found in the Trinity itself. They call it the first ecosystem. Now, this is where it can get a little theoretical. They use the term perichoresis, the mutual indwelling. For those of us who, didn't go to seminary, what does that actually look like as a blueprint?
That's a great question because mutual indwelling can sound a bit abstract. Think of it like a perfectly braided rope. No single strand is holding the full load, but if you take one away, the whole thing starts to fray.
Okay, I like that.
Or maybe a more complex analogy like a solar system. Every planet, every moon, relies on the gravitational pull of the others. There's constant movement and action, but it's all held together by perfect relational dependence.
That really clarifies the interdependence part. So can you break down the specific roles within that divine model? How does that inform the human structure?
For sure. We see three distinct functions that create the template. The Father is defined as the source, the one who initiates and sustains the vision, the calling for the movement.
And the Son, he would be the one who executes the mission.
Exactly. The Son is the sent. This role embodies the mission through incarnational action, through humility. He's the one who goes, but he's always perfectly connected back to the source.
And the Spirit.
The Spirit is the sustainer. This role is all about relational health, unity, and empowering everyone involved, no matter their role. The sustainer ensures the whole movement flows smoothly.
So you have source, sent, and sustainer. It's designed for mutual dependency, not a top-down hierarchy. But I have to ask, doesn't the source, the Father, still hold ultimate authority? How do we avoid just recreating that false hierarchy with the goer, the sent, feeling subordinate?
That's a brilliant question, and the sources address it by shifting the focus from worth to function.
Yeah.
Yes, the Father is the source of the vision, but the Son, the sent, is the source of the incarnation, the physical work on the ground.
Yeah, so it's distributed authority?
Distributed authority. In a healthy ecosystem, the sender holds authority over the financial investment. The coach holds authority over the goer's spiritual and emotional health. The intercessor holds authority in the spiritual realm. When everyone defers to their distinct essential function, that hierarchy of worth just dissolves.
I see. So if we accept that Trinitarian blueprint, then the human implementation has to reflect that. Every role is essential.
Absolutely. The goal is to distribute the load across what the sources call the 5 key roles.
Okay, let's get into those 5 key roles that make up this ecosystem. We already know the goers, the people who cross borders, take the risks. But who else is holding that rope?
Next, you have the intercessors. The source defines them as the spiritual engine of the movement. They're in these daily intentional rhythms of prayer. And it's crucial to see this not as just moral support,
Right.
but as the primary work. They are the power source that makes everything else possible.
Then you have the coaches. This is a role that I think often goes completely unrecognized.
Completely. But they are so critical for sustainability. They are the experts providing the care, the mentorship, the accountability that moves someone from that initial high-intensity zeal to endurance.
Without that external coach, the goer is almost guaranteed to burn out.
Inevitably, no matter how passionate they are. The fourth role is the church leaders. And their job, as we said, is that fundamental transformation of their church from a greenhouse into a launch pad.
Yeah.
Their main job is to mobilize, to resource, to train and send people out.
And finally, the 5th role, the one that the sources say is maybe the most powerful, but also the most marginalized, the senders.
The senders are defined as these kingdom-minded professionals who hold the rope, not by going, but by strategically leveraging their influence back home. And the sources are very specific. They call it the LIFE commitment.
LIF, what does that stand for?
Leadership, influence, finances, and expertise.
Let's break that down because just saying finances really misses the point here. What does leveraging a sender's expertise actually look like?
Well, it's highly targeted. It means a corporate lawyer volunteers to manage the organization's complex international compliance, or an accountant sets up the robust, ethical financial systems you need to last.
Or a tech professional builds the secure communication networks.
Exactly. They are leveraging their professional skills to build the durable architecture the goer needs to survive. It's strategic investment, not just writing a check when there's a crisis.
That LIFE framework really elevates the sender to an indispensable partner. Okay, so the sources list 10 architectural pillars. If we're focusing on interdependence, which of those really reinforce this structure?
I think we have to look at the ones focused on shared resources. Pillar 3 is breaking silos. The sources are just so realistic here.
Right?
Isolation kills movements. This is all about forging coalitions to share resources, intellectual property, even funding. It's the practical antidote to turf wars.
And since prayer is the engine, Pillar 7 must be critical, igniting intercession.
It absolutely is. It reinforces that idea that prayer isn't just prep for the work. It is the work. It demands that the leadership structures themselves, the planning meetings, the retreats, are centered on discerning what the Spirit is doing.
Prayer becomes part of the strategy, not just the opening devotion.
Precisely.
I also noticed Pillar 6, the incarnational bridge. That seems to speak to the quality of the interactions between these roles.
It does. It's about reimagining short-term trips. They need to be planned for ethical long-term impact that actually serves the goers and the local community instead of just being, a feel-good experience that reinforces a savior complex.
And Pillar 8 is a direct call for radical senders.
Exactly. Training centers in discernment and intentional investment. This makes sure that LIFE commitment is strategic, not reactive. So the sender isn't just responding to a crisis appeal. They're trained to see where their specific expertise, whether that's leadership influence or tech infrastructure, can best fortify the whole movement.
When you look at it like that, every single pillar, every role is about distributing the load and making sure no one is working alone.
So we've built the resilient architecture. The final piece of the puzzle is, what does success actually look like now? If we shift our whole model, our metrics have to change too.
They have to, because the old metrics are all about visibility and output things you can easily count. True kingdom impact needs what the sources call the movement metric. What are the core shifts we need to make?
The first one is a big one. Shifting from visibility to multiplication. We have to stop measuring how visible we are, our brand, our building, our budget. The only metric that really matters is the gospel spreading beyond the original team? Is the work replicating itself organically, locally?
To the point where the original organization is becoming less and less necessary.
That's the goal. The second contrast is moving from output to obedience.
This one feels harder for a lot of organizations. We love our numbers, how many attendees, how many programs.
We do. But the sources stress obedience over output. The real metric is whether the mission is aligned with God's current leading. You can be incredibly productive, but just slightly off mission. And if you're executing yesterday's strategy perfectly, that output is ultimately fragile.
Okay, but how do you measure something like obedience? Isn't that totally subjective?
Well, it requires that deep alignment between all 5 roles and a culture that is centered on that Pillar 7 ignited intercession. You measure it by auditing the degree to which your big strategic decisions were informed by prayer and shared discernment rather than just market trends or one leader's vision.
So obedience guarantees resilience where massive output doesn't.
Exactly. And that leads to the third and maybe most vital metric, shifting from personalities to legacy.
This is the ultimate test, isn't it? Will the movement endure for generations, or does it collapse when that initial charismatic hero steps away?
That's it. A movement built on healthy, distributed architecture, where authority and resources are shared across all 5 roles. That is the definition of legacy. It's built to outlast any single individual.
And for you, the listener, whether you see yourself as a goer, a sender, a coach, this shift is so crucial because it forces you to build structures that are inherently resilient. If your success metric requires you to always be visible or depends entirely on your personal strength, you are building fragility.
The whole point of the ecosystem is to distribute the pressure. This material really is a phenomenal synthesis of why systems fail and, more importantly, how to build them to last.
So to recap, a lasting movement relies on that Trinitarian blueprint of interdependence. It's anchored by prayer, and it requires everyone in the church to be an active contributor. You need all 5 roles goers, intercessors, coaches, church leaders, and those strategic senders using their LIFE commitment.
The central challenge is pretty clear. Don't do more for God, build with God. And if you're kind of auditing your own life or ministry right now, the sources offer a really powerful call to action.
First, audit your silos. I mean, where are you working in isolation right now, carrying burdens, financial, emotional, whatever, that were meant to be shared?
Second, hold the rope. Identify your unique role in the ecosystem. Your function, whether it's the engine of prayer or the infrastructure expertise, it's not secondary. It is foundational.
And finally, prioritize prayer. Reestablish it as the absolute center of your strategic planning, not just a nice add-on.
And that final pillar, Pillar 10, is sustaining momentum. It's defined as engineering a culture of multiplication that outlasts individuals.
Which brings us to our final thought for you, the listener. Take a moment and just consider the infrastructure you are currently building in your church, your business, your family, your ministry. Is its success and survival entirely dependent on your individual charisma, your personal effort, your singular strength?
Or is the structure you're building engineered for multiplication? Is it designed to distribute responsibility and leverage the LIFE commitments of others, guaranteeing that it will outlast you?
That's the difference between a fleeting project and an enduring God-sized movement. We've taken the deep dive, now it's time to start holding the rope together.